The transport ships appeared above Earth without warning. They came from the Galactic Council, massive vessels that blocked out the sun in 3 different time zones. On the orbital station above Earth, Captain Kevin Palmer watched the ships descend with a feeling that something was about to change forever. He did not know how right he was. Ambassador Velix was not like other aliens Kevin had met. The being from the Crystalline Collective did not communicate through words at first. Instead, messages appeared in every communication channel on Earth simultaneously. The message was simple and direct. The Galactic Council had made a decision. 5,000 human children between the ages of 4 and 16 would be removed from Earth. The Council had studied human genetics and determined that children raised on Earth were experiencing biological anomalies. The harsh environment of the Death World was causing developmental problems. These children needed to be relocated to proper civilized worlds where they could grow up correctly, away from the primitive violence of Earth. Kevin Palmer's first instinct was to refuse. He moved through the space station toward the command center, his uniform catching the light as he walked past other officers who looked just as confused and angry as he felt. When he reached the communications room, he opened a direct line to Ambassador Velix. The crystalline being appeared on screen, and Kevin could see something like satisfaction in the way its light refracted through the prism of its body. Velix explained the decision as though it was obvious, as though taking another species' children was a simple government procedure. Kevin's voice was steady when he responded. He told the ambassador that Earth was a sovereign world. Humans were members of the Galactic Council, though minor ones. Earth had signed treaties. Earth had respected the laws and structures of the greater galaxy. And now the Council was declaring that Earth could not even keep its own children. Velix's response was cold. The Council did not require approval from member worlds on matters of genetic health and welfare. Humans were classified as Deathworlders, beings who came from harsh environments that made them unsuitable for the peaceful galaxy. The children would be relocated. This was not a negotiation. The communication ended, and Kevin Palmer sat in silence for exactly 3 seconds. Then he began making calls. General Lisa Crawford was in a strategic meeting when Kevin's call came through. She listened to everything he had to say without interrupting. When he finished, she told him to secure the station and to contact every military command on Earth. Then she did something that had not been done in 15,000 years. She declared a state of emergency for the entire human species. Within 2 hours, every government on Earth knew what was happening. The President of the American Union, the Chancellor of the European Federation, the Premier of Asia, and the leaders of every other human nation received the same briefing. Their children were going to be taken. The Galactic Council had decided this was best. The response was not what the Council expected. Anna Wells was working at a refugee center in the Mediterranean region when the news reached the screens. She was a nurse practitioner, trained to help people through their worst moments. But nothing in her training prepared her for what she saw next. Emergency broadcasts went out to schools and homes. Parents were told their children needed to go to collection centers for medical evaluation. Mothers and fathers stood in long lines with their children. Some children were crying. Some did not understand what was happening. Anna moved through the crowds, speaking softly to the frightened young ones, trying to make them feel safe. But she could see the fear in their parents' eyes, and she understood that something terrible was about to happen. The collection centers became chaos. Parents did not want to give up their children. Security forces had to separate them physically. Children screamed for their mothers. Fathers tried to pull their sons and daughters away from the processing tables. But the Galactic Council's forces were patient and strong. They had done this before on other worlds. Anna Wells did something then that would change everything. She began recording. She captured videos of parents being torn away from their children. She filmed the fear on young faces. She documented the exact moment when a father tried to shield his daughter and was pushed to the ground. Every image, every moment of pain, she recorded it all. By evening, 800,000 human children had been removed from their homes and placed in holding facilities. Kevin Palmer watched from the orbital station as the Council's transport ships began loading them in. Rows of children, confused and terrified, walking up ramps into massive vessels designed to carry cargo across the galaxy. Kevin made a decision. He ordered every available Earth defense ship to move toward the transport convoy. He knew the ships would not catch the Council's vessels. Earth's technology was decades behind the established galactic powers. But he would try anyway. General Crawford was coordinating with government leaders when she received Kevin's message about the naval movement. She did not order him to stand down. Instead, she authorized him to proceed. Then she did something more. She opened a broadcast channel and spoke directly to all of humanity. Crawford's voice was steady and hard. She told every human being that their world had just changed. The Galactic Council had declared that Earth could not keep its own children. The Council had decided that humans were not fit to raise their own young. And now Earth would have to respond. She did not ask for permission. She did not suggest options. She stated a fact. Earth would move, Earth would act, and Earth would get its children back. The old age of peace and compliance was finished. Anna Wells watched the broadcast from the refugee center. Around her, thousands of parents held each other, their faces broken with grief and anger. But under the anger, something else was forming. A kind of determination that had never existed in human civilization before. The transport ships left Earth's atmosphere, carrying 5,000 children away from their home world. Below them, humans began to move. Military forces mobilized. Scientists started working on new weapons. And the galaxy, which had known peace for 15,000 years under the Galactic Council's rule, prepared to learn what happens when you take the children of a species with nothing left to lose. Captain Kevin Palmer watched the ships disappear into the darkness of space. He sat in his command chair and made a simple decision. Whatever came next, Earth would be ready. The age of following rules was over. The age of protecting what mattered most was beginning. General Lisa Crawford called the global summit 3 hours after the last transport ship disappeared from Earth sensors. Not a single world leader refused to attend. The conference room in Geneva filled with the presidents, chancellors, generals, and ministers of every human nation. There was no argument about what needed to happen. There were no politics, no debates about borders or national interests. There was only one question that mattered. How do we get our children back? Crawford stood at the center of the great table and looked at each leader in turn. The soldiers in the room could see it in her eyes. She had made a decision that would reshape human civilization. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of that decision. "We joined this galaxy 15,000 years ago," she said. "We accepted their rules. We signed their treaties. We played by their order. But the Galactic Council just declared that we cannot keep our own children. They have decided we are not worthy of raising our own young. I am telling you now, that era is finished." She pointed to a map showing all the human installations across the galaxy. Trade stations, mining colonies, research facilities, defense platforms. Humanity had built itself carefully into the galactic economy, playing small, following the rules, never challenging the established powers. "We are going to break the system," Crawford continued. "Not with words, not with complaints to the Council, but with action. Starting now." The room was silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. For the first time in recorded human history, they were choosing to abandon the galactic order. They were choosing to act against the greater powers. And they were choosing to do it together. Within hours, scientist Daniel Foster received a message. All restrictions on weapons research were removed. All the programs that had been locked away for decades. All the studies that had been stopped because they violated galactic treaties. All of it was now authorized. Foster worked in an underground facility in the Rocky Mountains. Around him were scientists who had spent their entire careers developing technologies that the Galactic Council had forbidden. They had weapons designs that could rival established military powers. They had propulsion systems that could make human ships faster than anything the Council had built. They had tools of war that had been sleeping for decades, waiting for this moment. "Get to work," a voice said over the communication system. It was Crawford. "We are moving from a defensive posture to an offensive capability. I need everything functional in 72 hours. Engineer Rebecca Young received similar orders at the orbital platform. Every space station above Earth would be weaponized. Every defensive system would be upgraded. Every possible platform would become a weapon. You understand what this means," Rebecca told her team. "We are preparing for war. Not negotiation. Not discussion. War." The team did not hesitate. They worked through the night, removing safety systems, adding weapons platforms, converting civilian structures into military installations. By morning, Earth's orbital platforms had transformed from trading posts into a formidable defense line. But Crawford was not thinking about defense. She was thinking about offense. She issued orders that shocked the galaxy. Effective immediately, every human trade vessel was ordered to disengage from galactic commerce. Every human worker was told to stop work on Council projects. Every human engineer was instructed to abandon all joint operations with other species. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the galactic economy. Human labor was woven into the foundation of the Council system. Humans built ships, mined resources, processed materials, and maintained infrastructure across the galaxy. When they suddenly stopped, the entire machine began to slow down. Supply chains broke. Power grids on alien worlds went dark because the humans who maintained them had abandoned their posts. Mining operations halted because the human workers had been withdrawn. Manufacturing plants shut down because the human engineers had walked away. And then Crawford did something even more bold. She opened a broadcast to every human being in the galaxy, no matter where they were. "You are part of something larger now," she said. "You are part of a species that is willing to burn down the galactic order to protect its children. Anyone who is willing to stand with Earth, who is willing to fight for human children and human freedom, you have my support. Anyone who chooses to remain loyal to the Galactic Council, understand that you are no longer welcome in human space." The response from humans across the galaxy was overwhelming. Soldiers on human-controlled worlds seized control of their installations. Workers walked away from their jobs. Families who had lived on alien worlds for generations began moving back to human space. In some places, humans fought small battles to secure their territory. But the message was clear. Humanity was no longer part of the galactic system. The Galactic Council's response was confusion. They had never experienced this kind of resistance before. For 15,000 years, their authority had been absolute. Species obeyed or they faced isolation. They did not expect rebellion. They certainly did not expect organized, species-wide rebellion. Ambassador Valix called for military action. The Council authorized forces to move on human positions and force compliance. But before those forces could be deployed, something happened that stopped the Council completely. Every human military vessel simultaneously moved toward Council positions. Not to attack, but to block. To intercept. To stand in the way. Captain Kevin Palmer commanded the Central Fleet. Around him were officers from every human nation, working together without politics, without hesitation. His ships formed a barrier between the Council's forces and Earth's remaining colonies. "This is Captain Kevin Palmer." He broadcast on all frequencies. "Any attempt to move against human positions will be met with military resistance. This is not a warning. This is a statement of fact." The Council's forces stopped. Their commanders reported back to the Central Authority. Humanity had become a unified military power. They had transformed from a minor member species into an existential threat in a matter of hours. General Crawford received reports of successful operations across the galaxy. Humans had secured their positions. The galactic economy was in chaos. And for the first time in 15,000 years, a species had openly challenged the Galactic Council's authority. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Then she returned to work. There were children to rescue, and she would not stop until every single human child was back on Earth. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. They had underestimated humanity. They had believed that a species that had accepted their role peacefully would continue to accept that role. They had not understood that there were limits to human patience. And they had just crossed one. What happened next would reshape the entire galactic order. But nobody knew it yet. All they knew was that the 15,000-year age of Council supremacy was beginning to crack. And the species that had cracked it would not stop until the entire system fell. The first real battle happened near Station Genesis, a Council research facility orbiting a dead moon on the outer edge of human space. Captain Kevin Palmer's fleet had tracked the main convoy of transport ships carrying human children. The convoy was moving toward the facility, planning to transfer the children to permanent holding chambers where they would be studied and experimented on for years. Palmer was not going to let that happen. He positioned his ships in a defensive formation, blocking the direct route to Station Genesis. The transport convoy slowed as it approached. The Council's military escort moved forward, their vessels dwarfing Palmer's older ships. On paper, the Council should have won this battle in minutes. Their weapons were more advanced. Their armor was stronger. Their experience in galactic warfare was measured in millennia. Palmer did not care about the papers. He cared about the 500 human children in those transport ships. "All stations, stand ready," he broadcast to his fleet. "Anyone who tries to pass us will find their path blocked. Anyone who tries to force the issue will find their ships burning. This is not a negotiation. This is a promise." The Council's commander issued an order. The escort ships moved forward aggressively, trying to force Palmer's blockade. But humans, it turned out, were willing to do things that the Council's forces had never considered. They were willing to throw away tactics and strategy and just fight. Palmer's ships opened fire, not with the precision and calculation that galactic warfare demanded, but with fury, with desperation, with the knowledge that human children were in those transport ships and would not be taken further. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Palmer's fleet was smaller and weaker, but they fought like a species that had nothing left to lose. 2 human ships were destroyed, their crews ejecting into space, ready to die rather than allow their children to be taken. The Council's escort fleet, shocked by the ferocity and the willingness of human pilots to sacrifice themselves, withdrew. The transport convoy stopped. It did not move forward. Back on Earth, General Crawford watched the battle through real-time communications. When it was over, she allowed herself to breathe. Then she began the next operation. Major Henry Patterson led the assault teams. 7 locations across occupied space were targeted simultaneously. These were Council research facilities where the kidnapped human children were being processed, tested, and cataloged. The assault was coordinated to happen at the exact same moment on every world. Patterson's team hit the first facility on Europa Station. The Council's guards were not prepared for a full military assault. They were researchers and technicians, not soldiers. When human forces breached the doors, moving with training and purpose, the guards fell quickly. Patterson moved deeper into the facility. The cold metal corridors reminded him of the stories his own daughter had told him before she was taken. He was moving forward to bring her home. The detention section was in the lower levels. When the doors opened, Patterson saw what the Council had been doing to human children. They were in suspension chambers, motionless, their bodies monitored by machines. Hundreds of them, some no older than 4 years old. "Get them out," Patterson ordered. "Every single one. Move fast." His teams worked with controlled speed, disconnecting the children from the machines, loading them onto medical transports. Some children began waking up, confused and frightened. Some were still in suspension. Patterson did not stop to think about the trauma they had experienced. He just got them moving toward the exits. The other assault teams were successful at their locations as well. Major Sarah Price secured the research facility on Kepler Station. Commander Mark Johnson led the assault on the processing center near Tau Ceti. In less than an hour, 7 Council facilities had been hit and emptied. The Galactic Council's response was swift and angry. They sent fleets to the locations. They issued threats and demands. But by then, the human children were already being moved away from the stations, already being transferred to human ships, already being sent home, back on Earth. Anna Wells received the first group of rescued children. They arrived on a military transport, 500 young people, who had been taken from their homes and subjected to who knew what kind of testing and experimentation. Some of the children could walk. Others had to be carried. Some were conscious and confused. Others were still sedated from the suspension chambers. Anna moved among them with a calm that came from years of medical training, but with something deeper underneath it. A kind of focused fury that made her move faster, speak clearer, and work harder than she had ever worked before. "You are safe now," she told each child as she evaluated them. "You are home. Earth is home." A small boy, maybe 6 years old, grabbed her hand. He was trembling. "Are they coming back?" he asked. "No," Anna said, and she meant it with everything in her body. "They are never coming back." General Crawford was coordinating with the other assault team leaders when the final report came in. 7,500 human children had been rescued from Council facilities. That was more than the 5,000 that had been originally taken. The Council had apparently already been collecting other species' children as well, and human forces had freed them all. Crawford made a decision. She opened a broadcast to the Galactic Council. "Hear me," she said, her voice steady and cold. "We have recovered our children. We have destroyed your facilities. We have proven that your military is not unbeatable. And we are just getting started. For 15,000 years, you have operated without fear. That era is finished. Now you will know fear. Now you will know what it means to be the weaker power." The message was not diplomacy. It was a declaration of something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity was not asking for anything. Humanity was taking what it needed. On the Council's central station, Ambassador Velix watched the broadcast. The crystalline being's light had dimmed with shock. The Council had never been spoken to like this. The Council had never been defied like this. And now they had to decide whether to continue escalating the conflict or whether to step back. But before Velix could make that decision, something changed. Other species began acting. The Andorians sent ships to secure their own children being held in Council facilities. The Vorath launched their own assault teams. The galaxy, which had been unified under Council rule for 15,000 years, suddenly fractured into 1,000 different interests and goals. The order that the Council had built was cracking, and the species that had cracked it was still standing, still fighting, and still absolutely unwilling to stop until their children were home safe. The Galactic Council's leadership met in emergency session after losing control of the situation. They had expected a quick military response from humanity. They had expected compliance after suffering initial casualties. They had expected fear. Instead, they got something they could not control. Ambassador Felix presented the data to the council members. Humanity had coordinated military operations across 7 different star systems simultaneously. They had destroyed council facilities without hesitation. They had freed not just human children, but children from multiple other species. And the most troubling part, they were still mobilizing. Reports came in from across the galaxy. Human military forces were moving toward council positions everywhere. Not attacking yet, but positioning, waiting, ready to strike if the council made any aggressive move. Other species, seeing humanity stand against the council and survive, began asking questions about their own rights and freedoms. The Varath, a species that had been subjugated for 2,000 years, openly rebelled. They seized control of 3 star systems and declared independence from council rule. The Andorians demanded representation on the council's decision-making body. The Telkarites threatened to withdraw all trade. The carefully maintained system of control was falling apart. General Crawford was in the command center when the council sent their message of capitulation. They wanted to negotiate. They were offering to discuss terms. Crawford smiled grimly. Then she issued new orders. Every human military vessel in the galaxy was instructed to prepare for total war. Every scientist was told to weaponize everything they could create. Every human world was transformed into a military production facility. She was not going to negotiate from a position of weakness. She was going to negotiate from a position of absolute strength. Kevin Palmer received command of the entire human fleet. Under his authority, he coordinated with military leaders across human space. They formed plans for systematic reduction of council power. They mapped out targets. They prepared to assault council worlds if necessary, but the council did not want total war. They had finally understood what humanity had known from the beginning. They could not win this fight. A delegation from the council arrived at Earth with a proposal. They were willing to discuss new terms. They were willing to make concessions. They wanted to avoid the complete collapse of galactic civilization. General Crawford met with the council's representatives in a secure facility. She brought with her Captain Kevin Palmer, scientist Daniel Foster, and Commander Marcus Lee, who had become one of her most trusted military advisors. The council offered to return all human children. They offered to compensate Earth for the damage caused. They offered to restore trade relationships. They offered to accept Earth as a full member of the council with voting rights on all future decisions. Crawford listened to the entire proposal without interrupting. When they finished, she said something that made clear the gulf between what the council was offering and what humanity demanded. "Those terms are a starting point," she said, "but they are not enough." She laid out her demands. First, a complete restructuring of the council's decision-making process. Humanity would have full voting power equal to any other major species, not as a minority member, but as a major power. Second, all weapons and technologies that have been forbidden to humanity would be declassified. Third, the concept of Death World classification would be abolished permanently. No species would ever be classified as primitive or unfit to govern itself. Fourth, and this was the demand that shocked the council's representatives most, any council decision regarding a species' internal affairs, particularly the removal of children, would require unanimous consent, including that species' votes. The council tried to negotiate. They offered partial acceptance of these terms. But Crawford would not budge. She had not fought this hard and sacrificed this much just to go back to being a minor species following council rules. Finally, Ambassador Velix spoke directly to Crawford. The being's voice was different now, stripped of the superiority it had carried before. "You understand what you are asking," Velix said. "You are asking to reshape a 15,000-year-old system. You are asking to fundamentally alter how galactic civilization functions." "Yes," Crawford replied. "And you are going to accept every single term, because if you do not, I will destroy the Council's military power and establish a new galactic order without you. You can accept these terms and remain in power in a new role, or you can refuse and watch everything you have built collapse." There was a long silence. Then Velix agreed to present Crawford's demands to the full council session. The vote would determine the fate of galactic civilization. 3 days later, the council voted. It was not unanimous. Some members voted against the restructuring. The Alien Confederation abstained, but a majority voted to accept Earth's demands. The 15,000-year age of absolute council supremacy was over. Back on Earth, the children who'd been rescued were being reunited with their families. Anna Wells was there for most of it, watching as mothers held their sons and daughters for the first time in weeks. Watching as fathers collapsed with relief when they saw their children were alive and would recover. Some of the children had psychological trauma from their time in suspension. Some had physical injuries from the Council's experiments. Some would need years of healing. But they were home. They were alive. And humanity had proven that it would burn down galaxies to protect them. The new treaties were signed in a ceremony that included representatives from every species in the galactic community. Humanity's place had changed forever. They were no longer a minor species playing by other people's rules. They were a power to be respected and feared. Daniel Foster's weapons research became the foundation for human military dominance. Rebecca Young's starship designs made Earth's fleet technologically superior to Council vessels. Marcus Lee became commander of the Joint Defense Forces that would ensure human independence could never be threatened again. Kevin Palmer took a position overseeing Earth's security operations. His first act was to establish a permanent defensive network around Earth that could not be bypassed or destroyed without initiating a galactic war. The message was clear. Earth was now untouchable. General Lisa Crawford became the first human member of the Council's executive board. In her first act in that position, she introduced a new law. No species would ever again have their children removed without full consent and representation. No species would ever again be classified as primitive or unsuitable for self-governance. The older powers of the galaxy were shocked by how quickly humanity had reshaped the order. But there was nothing they could do. Humanity had proven something that nobody had expected: that an outlaw species with nothing to lose was more powerful than empires built over millennia. The age of the Galactic Council's absolute power was finished. The age of balance and shared power was beginning. And it had taken the moment when one species chose their children over everything else to make that change happen. 5 years after the Galactic Council's restructuring, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable compared to what it had been before. The tight control that had kept the Council in absolute power for 15,000 years had been shattered. And the species that had shattered it was now reshaping everything. Captain Kevin Palmer retired from active military command. He was not young anymore, and he had earned his rest. But before he stepped down, he made sure that Earth's defensive systems were unbreakable. Every orbital platform was equipped with weapons that could rival any galactic power. Every space station had automated defenses that could engage enemy forces without human direction. Earth was not going to be vulnerable again. Not ever. Palmer established the Earth Defense Academy, where he trained the next generation of military leaders. He spoke to them about the moment when humanity had chosen to stand. The moment when they had decided that their children mattered more than peace. That moment changed everything, he told his students. Not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Never forget that one species choosing to fight changed the order of everything. Anna Wells expanded her Center for Children's Recovery into a full medical institute. The work was slow and painful. Many of the children who had been held by the council carried deep psychological scars. Some had nightmares that would persist for years. Some could not be around strangers without becoming panic. But Anna was patient with them. She had promised them they were safe, and she spent every day proving that promise was true. One of the children, a girl named Maya, who had been taken when she was 8 years old, eventually became one of Anna's assistants. Maya had experienced the worst the council could do, and she had survived. She wanted to help others survive as well. She wanted to make sure that no child would ever feel the isolation and fear that she had felt. Daniel. Foster's weapons research transformed Earth from a species that played by galactic rules into a military power that other civilizations had to respect. His creations were not just weapons. They were deterrents. They were the physical representation of humanity's determination to never be vulnerable again. Foster received offers from a dozen different species to work for their governments. He refused all of them. He worked only for Earth. In his laboratory, surrounded by his team, he developed technologies that made human ships faster, stronger, and more lethal than anything the Council had in its arsenal. Rebecca. Young starship designs became legendary across the galaxy. The new generation of human vessels could outmaneuver anything built by the older species. They could outrun Council ships. They could outgun Andorian battle cruisers. And they could do all of it with less crew and less resources than any competing design. Young was honored by every human government and recognized by the galaxy as a genius of engineering. But when asked about her greatest achievement, she always said the same thing: keeping humans in power, keeping Earth safe. That is all that matters. Marcus Lee was promoted to the rank of commander and given authority over the joint defense forces that protected human interests across the galaxy. He worked closely with military leaders from other species, who were now beginning to stand up to the Council's old authority structures. Where humans had led the way in resistance, other species followed. The Vorath, inspired by humanity's success, continued their rebellion and eventually established an independent government. The Telkarites demanded equal representation in all council decisions and got it. The Andorians became military allies with humanity, their combined forces creating a deterrent that made any council aggression unthinkable. General Lisa Crawford served on the council's executive board for 7 years. In that time, she initiated more changes than any council member in the previous 1,000 years. She introduced new laws protecting the rights of all species. She established protocols for fair trade and resource distribution. She created a framework for independence that allowed smaller species to govern themselves without council oversight. Some older council members resisted her changes, but they could not stop her. Humanity's military power backed everything she proposed. The message was clear. The old days of unquestioned authority were gone. The new age of shared power was here. In her final speech to the Council, Crawford stood before the Assembly of Representatives from hundreds of species. She spoke about the moment when the Council had taken human children. She spoke about the decision that humanity had made to fight back. And she spoke about the lesson that the galaxy needed to remember. 15,000 years ago, you built an order based on power and control, Crawford said. You believed that control was eternal. You believed that your authority would never be challenged. But you underestimated something basic about every species. We protect our children. We will fight for them. We will burn down everything to keep them safe. Never make that mistake again. Never underestimate what a species will do to protect its young. The council chamber was silent when she finished. The children who had been taken and then rescued became something more than victims. They became symbols of humanity's transformation. Some of them became soldiers like Major James Cooper, who led assault teams on worlds where the council had tried to reassert control. Some became scientists like Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who helped other species develop technologies to secure their independence. Some became diplomats like Ambassador David Park, who traveled to distant star systems to negotiate treaties of alliance and cooperation. All of them carried the story of what had happened to them. And all of them understood, at the deepest level of their being, that they had been saved by a species willing to stand against the entire galactic order. 15 years after the taking of the children, a monument was erected on Earth's orbital station. It showed a mother and child standing together, with the darkness of space behind them and light breaking through from ahead. The inscription was simple. Here humanity stood. Here humanity fought. Here humanity reminded the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for. The monument became a place of pilgrimage for humans and other species alike. People from across the galaxy came to see it, to understand what it meant, to learn the story of the species that had challenged 15,000 years of order. The Galactic Council still existed. It still held meetings and made decisions, but it was no longer supreme. It no longer dictated the fate of all species. Humanity had ensured the power was distributed, that no single entity could ever again become absolute. And in doing that, humanity had changed not just its own future, but the future of every species in the galaxy, on Earth. In the memorial gardens where the recovered children often came to remember their trauma and celebrate their survival, a group of young people gathered. Some were 8 or 9 years old now, born after the conflict had ended. Others were young adults, working in the military or in government. They all carried the mark of that moment when their species had stood against the galaxy and won. Maya Wells, now 23 years old, stood with them. She had recovered from her time in the Council's suspension chambers. She had built a life. She had found purpose in helping other survivors heal. And she had become someone that Anna Wells was proud of. "Why do you think we survived?" a young girl asked her. Maya looked out at the stars. She thought about the moment when human forces had breached the Council's facilities. She thought about the determination she had seen in Captain Palmer's eyes. She thought about the unity of an entire species choosing to stand together. "Because we had something worth fighting for," Maya said. "Because we chose each other. Because in the end, the Galactic Council did not understand that some things are more powerful than technology or military might. Some things are worth burning the whole galaxy down for." The girl nodded. She understood. In the new galactic order that humanity had created, that understanding would never be forgotten.